Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Dan Blanchard with the Travel and Time with Dan Show. Today, I am in Portsmouth, New Hampshire at Prescott Park, one of the oldest European settlements in New England, 1623, on a very, very cloudy or foggy day, I should say. Now listen, with the Travel and Time with Dan Show, we mix travel with history and with leadership, and of course with me, Dan Blanchard. All right, and today we have a fascinating story and show for you on Portsmouth, New Hampshire, the little city with the big influence. So let me talk a little bit about how amazing this place is. We're going back way before the American Revolutionary War, right before Lexington, before Concord. There was a fort here called William and Mary Fort that was being controlled by the British. Well, there's a guy named John Langdon and his crew. They attacked Fort William and Mary and took the gunpowder away from the British, and that gunpowder is eventually going to be used in Boston at the Bunker Hill, Breed Hill battles against the British. That's right, their own gunpowder is going to be used against them in Boston. And this rebellion, this act of rebellion, was actually pretty much one of the first in the American Revolutionary War. This is before Lexington, before Concord, before the shots heard around the world. You know, Boston gets all the credit, but basically the American Revolutionary War started right here when we stole their gunpowder, right? And believe it or not, Paul Revere was actually here in the area, and the Portsmouth people here in New Hampshire, they told them, they said, ride back to Boston and get the gunpowder, all right? You're gonna need the gunpowder when you fight the British. And of course, everybody knows Paul Revere's midnight ride, all right? So now, what makes Portsmouth so important, this little teeny town, a little teeny city with a big influence? Well, for one, there's a river here that's very important, right? That gives it ocean access, which equals trade, all right? And that trade equals wealth and gives it huge strategic importance, all right? This is pretty much the oldest U.S. naval shipyard in the United States, all right? So shipbuilding is very, very important here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. All right, and not only shipbuilding very important, but obviously naval defense goes with that. And then you got the whole Industrial Revolution, spins off of what they're doing here at naval defense and shipbuilding, okay? Now, have you ever heard of John Paul Jones? All right, for those of you who've heard of him, he is the father of the United States Navy and maybe one of the best naval officers this country has ever seen. All right, well, he had his ship built here, the USS Ranger, right? That's right, out of Portsmouth. USS Ranger was built right here. John Paul Jones right here. And eventually, he even takes that ship and he sails it all the way to England during the American Revolutionary War to harass them over in England as well as they're fighting us over here. All right, so let's look a little bit at the history timeline here with this naval shipyard and the whole Navy thing that they do here in Portsmouth. In the 1800s, obviously it was wooden. Wooden ships were being built here. Later on, they're going to go to iron-clad ships here. And then eventually, they're going to go to submarines. Now, they didn't invent the submarines here, but they sure as heck pioneered submarines right here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And in 1905, this place is going to get super famous, all right? What's going to happen is there's going to be the Treaty of Portsmouth that's going to take place here. Teddy Roosevelt's going to come here. He's going to broker a peace, all right, between Russia and Japan, and they're going to be here at the Naval Shipyard, somewhere that's neutral, right? Teddy Roosevelt's going to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and this place is going to be on the map. Little city, big influence, worldwide diplomacy, peace negotiations. Oh my gosh, they're going to be famous because of that. Right? They're going to be like a small American city serves as a stage of global conflict resolution right here. All right, this Portsmouth, they're going to become prosperous, right? From the Atlantic trade, they're going to become prosperous. However, there's going to be a black mark on them because with the Atlantic trade and them becoming prosperous, this is a big port for the Atlantic slave trade. Awesome. Yep. And in 2003, not too far ago, 2003, there's going to be a reminder, stark reminder of this history here when they find an African-American burial ground in 2003 to remind people that this was a major port of the African-American slave trade, where they made a lot of money off of that bleak moment in their history. All right? Now listen, Portsmouth is like, if you think about Portsmouth, I want you to think Portsmouth is like the spark before the explosion, right, for the American Revolutionary War in Boston. Now, a lot of things happen here, and eventually they're not as rich. They don't make the kind of money, especially when the wars are over. They don't make the kind of money they used to make, whatnot. But they are going to become really good experts at historic preservation, right? And they're going to create a thing here that's going to be called culture tourism, right? People come down here, they're going to see the buildings, right? The buildings look kind of like they did back in the day. I just rode through the city here. You got all these little old houses, all these brick little buildings here. It is such a cool place to drive through. And this place attracts a lot of tourism money, historic tourism, culture tourism money. So they've done really well at taking what they have and making good use of it, all right? So, I like to say, if you mix travel with history and leadership, if you have not been down here, you got to come down here to Portsmouth. It's a really cool place to see. History, I've already given you a bunch of history here. So what's the leadership, right? Well, the leadership is this. Before the shots heard around the world in Massachusetts, Portsmouth proved something first, right? They proved that real leaders don't wait, they act. That's right. Real leaders act, right? They don't wait, they act. I mean, Boston, make it all the glory of the American Revolution, but Portsmouth lit the fuse. Maybe they lit the fuse for that, all right? So anyways, thank you for spending time with me with my Travel and Time with Dan show, where we mix travel and history and leadership with me, Dan. We're going to be back again real soon with another great show somewhere else. And until then, you take care and have a wonderful day.